Welcome to The Truth on March the 7th. Today we're going to give you a tour of our new studio. We're so excited. We're coming to you from West Palm Beach, Florida. You can watch us right now on YouTube Live, Getter Live, Rumble Live, Facebook Live, and you can actually see the studio as we show it to you. So come on in. Today's broadcast of The Truth is brought to you by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy. They're a restaurant services company right there in Atlanta, Georgia. And our studio sponsor is Bone Frog Coffee. They are a company comprised of Navy SEAL and veterans. So we're just really excited. Welcome them to The Truth. And we'll tell you a lot more about Bone Frog Coffee as the show progresses. Back here we have what we call the glass cage. This is where Anthony does his work, and occasionally we even let him out. Here is home base. It's our primary set where I do the show. But just one last component over here is what we refer to as our vignette. But with that introduction, and I hope that we didn't bore you if you're exclusively on the radio. But anyway, let's get to our show now. And first up, we're going to talk about Donald Trump and Iran. You know, Tucker Carlson has caused quite a stir because he has come out in opposition to the war in Iran. Well, that caused President Trump to say he thinks that Tucker has lost it. Well, I want to make it clear that I fully support President Trump's initiative in Iran. They have terrorized this country and the world since 1972 when they captured 53 American diplomats at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Jimmy Carter notoriously tried to command from the White House a rescue attempt where two U.S. Marine helicopters collided in the desert, costing several Marines their lives, but more importantly, it caused the mission to completely fail. So here's what President Trump had to say earlier this week about his invasion of Iran.
The United States military, together with the wonderful Israeli partners, continues to totally demolish the enemy far ahead of schedule and at levels that people have never seen before, actually. We're destroying more of Iran's missiles and drone capability every single hour, knocking them out like nobody thought was possible. Their Navy is gone. 24 ships in 3 days. That's a lot of ships. Their anti-aircraft weapons are gone, so they have no air force, they have no air defense. All of their airplanes are gone. Their communications are gone. Missiles are gone, launches are gone, about 60% and 64% respectively. Other than that, they're doing quite well. I said, what's left? But they're tough, and they want to fight. And they're calling, they're saying, how do we make a deal? I said, you're being a little bit late, and we want to fight now more than they do. And I'm once again calling on all members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the military and the police, to lay down their arms. They're only going to be killed. And now is the time to stand up for the Iranian people and help take back your country. You're going to have a chance after all these years to take back your country. Accept immunity. We'll give you immunity. And we'll be giving you really the right side of history, because that's what it is. So you'll be perfectly safe with total immunity, or you'll face absolutely guaranteed death, and I don't want to see that.
Man, those were powerful words from the president. I don't know who that guy was on the right-hand side of the screen, seesawing back and forth and smiling like, how's that expression go? The what that swallowed the canary? Anyway, I saw very little to be amused at with what President Trump was saying. This is very serious business. One of our frequent listeners and viewers wrote me and said, has President Trump lost all credibility as he starts a war and asks for regime change in Iran, but only needs to lose a handful to lose control of government, and is now a target himself because he has killed Iran's leader? And Iran may not be able to fight a conventional war and win, but there are lots of soft targets in the United States that could get very expensive, and other ways to sabotage, like what Israel did with the pagers and explosives. Well, look, I get your sentiment, but I respectfully disagree. That is a risk that we have to take. And while Tucker Carlson may think that it's a bad idea, I respectfully disagree. And I say that because just look at the atrocities that Iran has created and committed over the years. We can start with the 1979 hostage crisis. You may recall this. The hostage crisis cost Jimmy Carter his second term in office because they got 53 or 56 American diplomats and held them for, I think, over 2 years, as I recall. And that was a very low point in America's history. Carter tried to run an operation from the White House to secure and release the hostages, but it failed miserably with 2 helicopters colliding in the desert, taking some of our Marines. It was a sad day for America. And then, as I said, it ultimately cost Carter his re-election when he lost to President Reagan. I'll come back to that in a second. 1983, the Beirut bombings were conducted by Hezbollah, which have been funded by Iran. 1996, the Kober Towers bombing, which houses U.S. Air Force personnel in Saudi Arabia. In 1988, they executed thousands of people in their own country. And then 1,000 U.S. soldiers were killed in Afghanistan from Iranian roadside bombs. And then in the most recent past, which really got us into the place we are now, they tortured and killed over 30,000 protesters. President Trump said, you either stop the killing or you face the consequences. And now they are facing the consequences, and Iran has now approached the United States and said, what do we have to do to have a ceasefire, to achieve peace? And President Trump it's too late. He is now saying that he will accept nothing less than a full unconditional surrender and the installation of a reasonable and democratic supported leader within Iran. So that's why I support President Trump unqualifiedly. They have tortured this country, they have terrorized this country, and they have conducted terrorism throughout the world for the last 60 years. Enough is enough. President Trump gave them ample warning. Now, you may also remember that back in 2024, not so very long ago, the supreme leader of Iran, and it may have been predated that actually, said that they wanted to eliminate President Trump. And they put out a call to have a hit and a reward for anyone who would assassinate President Trump. Well, I think we all know President Trump well enough to know that that probably wasn't going to go over well. So one way to interpret all of this is, really, you're going to put out a hit on me? You're going to kill me? I don't think so. I'm going to kill you first. And that's exactly what has happened. They begged for it. They asked for it, and they got it. Iran has about 100 million citizens. It's a large country. It is strategically in a very important place in the world, and they are one of the world's largest producers of petroleum. So I don't think oil had anything to do with it, but they also sell their oil to Russia and China. That may have had a lot to do with it. So we'll see how things evolve. I do want this to end and end in a hurry. I know President Trump does too. He said that. But the Iranian leaders, whoever they are today, most of the ones that we know have been executed or killed in this war. They better have a come to Jesus moment. That's a phrase. I don't expect them to come to Jesus, although it would be wonderful if they would. But they better get right with the world, or else this attack is not going to end. It will only end, as President Trump said, with their complete unconditional surrender, which would include a promise not to re-engage in the development of nuclear weapons and the installation of a leader that the rest of the world can live with. Kristi Noem is out. Seems like her vanity project really kind of caught up with her. Here's some of the grilling that she got when she appeared before the United States Congress just earlier this week.
So, Secretary Noem, at any time during your tenure as Director of Department of Homeland Security, have you had sexual relations with Corey Lewandowski?
Mr. Chairman, I am shocked that we're going down and peddling tabloid garbage in this committee today.
Reclaiming
and
my
ma'am,
time.
one thing that I would tell you is that he is a special government employee who works for the White House. There are thousands of them in the federal government.
So, reclaiming
and
my
is an
time,
advisor
Secretary, it is
and has
okay for
no,
you to be
no
offended
authority
by
to
the
be
question.
making any
It is
decisions.
okay for you to
has
be
no
offended
authority
by the
to
question.
be making
But it is
decisions
also
and
a
putting
real
up your
question.
position. So what I would say
And
to
you
you
should be able to
is
answer
that
the
what we do
question
at the Department of Homeland
clearly
Security every single
and without
day,
any hesitation.
every single day is to protect
If
this
someone
country
is
and
asking
to make
if
decisions.
you or any federal official is sleeping with their subordinate, that should
I
be
have-
the easiest. You should be wanting to answer that question.
Is garbage?
Because it is not about
It is
your sex
offensive
life.
that you have brought
It is
that up.
about your
So
judgment.
that kind of garbage
It is
has
about
been refuted
reclaiming
for
my
years,
time so
and
that
you
I
need
can
to
hear myself
recognize-
on
Belongs.
the chair. Noem tightens her grip on DHS. Lewandowski fired FEMA admin.
Without
while sitting-
objection.
Okay. The next one is Kristi Noem secretly took a cut of political donations from ProPublica.
Without objection.
Kristi Noem fires pilot over a blanket, but is forced to reinstate him to fly home. Wall Street Journal.
Without objection.
Lewandowski taking out trash at Noem's D.C. home. Daily Beast.
Without objection.
Barbie's Mile High privacy chamber with alleged lover exposed. Wall Street Journal. How Corey Lewandowski became Kristi Noem's gatekeeper at DHS.
Without objection.
A pilot fired over Kristi Noem's missing blanket and the constant chaos inside DHS. Wall
Objection.
Street Journal. Police charged Trump campaign manager with assault. PBS News.
Without objection.
Woman who accused Corey Lewandowski of assault speaks out. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. CBS
Objection.
News. Lewandowski's firm quietly inked deal with Venezuela-owned company Politico.
Without objection.
List of U.S. cities raising security amid Iran conflict. Newsweek.
Without objection.
Kristi Noem, I have a few more, I'm sorry. Kristi Noem misled Congress yesterday about top aides' role in DHS contracts.
Without objection.
Policy number 10271 from ICE. It is an anti-fraternization policy prohibiting romantic or sexual relationships between supervisors and their subordinates. And with that, I yield.
Without objection.
Boy, is that messy or what? And, you know, I knew in the moment that her goose was cooked. And President Trump summarily dismissed her shortly after that congressional testimony. But look, this is not the first time that Lewandowski has stepped in it with the president. He was actually President Trump's campaign manager in 2016 and did a remarkable job. And he, I think, deservedly got a lot of credit for having helped President Trump get elected. He was there with him from the day Donald Trump came down the escalator, and he was able to maintain his managerial role for most of the campaign, but was later booted in preference of Don Manafort. And if I'm not mistaken, it was over similar things. Corey Lewandowski has had a problem maintaining his self-discipline when it comes to women. And he has had, reportedly, allegedly, extramarital affairs throughout his tenure, causing President Trump to release him, if I'm not mistaken, on true prior occasions. So you don't have to be a fortune teller to know that Lewandowski is out as soon as Kristi Noem is out. Lewandowski probably is already sent packing. So I had a conversation, a text exchange yesterday with a listener of our program, and we were talking about this event, this spectacle. And I said that, apart from the sheer immorality of what they were doing, this could take us down a pretty deep rabbit hole, so I'm just not going to go there. But aside from the immorality of what has occurred, allegedly, but I don't think it's a well-kept secret. I mean, I've read about it for the last 6 months, and there have been many news reports about Lewandowski actually living with Kristi Noem on a military base in officer housing. And I think that has been for her protection, actually, because she has shown a lot of courage. And this deportation stuff is messy, and it has cost people their lives and resulted in ICE officers being assaulted. One assaulted by a lady who chose to use her car as a lethal weapon, and that impulsive bad decision cost her her life. And I'm sorry, but I fully support the police officer, the ICE officer in that case. And so, but that's caused Secretary Noem a lot of blowback, not only from the left, but also from Republicans alike. And I have been very vocal about my belief that the way, not that we're deporting illegals, but the way that we're deporting illegals is costing President Trump a lot in public opinion polls. And so it was the issue on which he was largely elected, but it paradoxically is the issue that could cost us the midterms if we don't find a better way to go about deporting these people. Because like it or not, and I'm sorry, I'm one of them, I believe in the humane treatment of all people. Now that does not mean that I believe in the humane treatment of the lady that used her car as a weapon. And so she asked for it, she got what she deserved, just like the guy that went to the protest. He went back to his house, got a pistol, and then chose to insert himself into a law enforcement detaining of another protester. He got in the middle of it. Tensions became high. An officer removed the weapon from his belt, and less than a second later, he was shot and killed. Now, we don't know what the state of the mind was of the officer. And as I've said on this show, that is a closer call. But on balance, I'm going to err on the side of the ICE officer who had less than a second to make a decision. I think it's probably reasonable that he saw the weapon but didn't see that it was being wielded by one of his fellow officers as he extricated it from the belt of the deceased. And I believe, I could be mistaken, but I'm not gonna say that because I really don't know. I was gonna say that the weapon was discharged accidentally, but I don't believe that's the case as I'm reflecting on it. But regardless, there was a weapon, it was visible. It was removed from the deceased belt loop, and he was shot. All in a very, very tenth of a second, half of a second, split second decision by that ICE officer. I'm sorry that the guy got shot. I'm sorry that he died. I'm sorry that he chose to come to the protest with a weapon. I'm sorry that he came to the protest with a weapon and inserted himself into a police officer's performance of his duty. He just was, I don't know what planet he was on. You know, there's some things you just don't do. I used the analogy 2 weeks ago. I said, we know that we don't put our finger in a light socket. You know you don't get involved in a police person's detainment of an individual or arrest. You just know better, or you should. So all of that has created a lot of dust around Secretary Noem. And Corey Lewandowski, I know Corey extremely well professionally. He was my campaign manager or campaign consultant in 2022 when I ran for Attorney General of Georgia. Corey and I literally spoke on the phone every single day for 3 to 4 months. And I had previously had breakfast with him at Mar-a-Lago. We had had several chance encounters and very cordial exchanges. We never talked about his social life or really his family, other than I know that he has been, I believe, a very devoted father. But the point that I made to my friend yesterday in text messages was, if you could just set aside your view of the morality of what they did, you cannot set aside the selfishness and the mistreatment of their respective spouses, because they're both married. And they are both married to by every account I can read. And I've never met Corey's wife. I have met Kristi Noem. I had lunch with her in Atlanta 3 or 4 years ago. Lovely lady, very nice, very articulate, really smart. She was governor of South Dakota at that point. I really liked her, but what she's done, I'm sorry, forget about the laws of God. I'm not dismissing them. I'm just saying, for the sake of this monologue, put that aside for a moment. What I am saying in very blatant terms, and regardless of whether you believe in God, regardless of whether you believe in the Ten Commandments, surely you don't believe in desecrating and destroying the feelings of your spouse, of one spouse. I think it's inexcusable and unpardonable. And I like Corey, I really do. And it's none of my, frankly, it's none of my business. It really isn't my business. But why she stuck with him, I don't really know. Why Governor Noem, Secretary Noem's husband, has stuck by her, I don't know. The news reports are that they're both very private people, and neither of them have discussed this. And as far as I'm concerned, let them have their privacy. I'm not interested in dragging anyone's name or reputation through the mud on this show, but we've been dealt a hand. I think I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge it, and I think it had everything to do with Secretary Noem's dismissal. They weren't even discreet about it. I mean, it was the biggest, what did I read? The worst kept secret in Washington, really nationally, because I read a piece in the Wall Street Journal just a few weeks ago. And so it is really a shame, but it's cost them both their roles in government. Evidently, the new head of Homeland Security, a United States Senator, supposedly is a rock star. President Trump referred to him as a warrior. So I don't think that the post will stay vacant long. And I think that we will see a resumption of the deportations in the weeks to come. Well, we lost an American treasure this week, Lou Holtz. He was a renowned football coach. He had at least 2 national titles, maybe more. I meant to fact check that before I came on the air, and I forgot. He also had a stint in the pro football league. He was a coach, if I'm not badly mistaken, for the New York Jets. It was not a successful venture, and he came back to college football, and subsequently, if I'm pretty sure that he won a national championship after that. I crossed paths with Lou Holtz a few times during my life. The most recent was in Washington, D.C. about 3 years ago at a America First meeting, a symposium in Washington. At that symposium, President Trump came. It was the first time he had returned to Washington since he was cheated out of the 2020 election. So it must have been about 2023, I think, that I saw him. But the point is, I had a very nice, just a wonderful conversation with Lou Holtz. And you know how sometimes when you meet famous people, they're looking at the exit sign and looking at their watch like you're impeding them, you're delaying them. Coach Holtz stood there and spoke to me for the better part of 5 minutes. And he was such a delightful guy. And I had seen him speak in group settings a couple of times. One time he took that day's USA Today and shredded it vertically into about 10 pieces. You know, he practiced magic. This was at the end of his speech. And then he crumpled the paper together and popped it with his hand and popped it out, and the paper was put back perfectly together. Somebody from the audience shouted, "How did you do that, Coach Holtz?" And he responded, "Perfectly, I thought." He was just a great guy, and his players will tell you, tough as nails. Tough as nails. And the tributes have been flooding in, and I really have a very sad heart. But he lived a full life and a very meaningful life. Here are a couple of tributes that have come in.
We'd like to send our condolences to the entire Holtz family and say, rest easy, Coach Lou Holtz. We appreciate the hell out of your contributions to sport and society. Obviously, legendary coach who has amassed 249 career wins as a head coach. His record at Notre Dame, 130-2. Is that good? Yeah, he's a national champ and obviously would go on to become an international treasure. Rest easy, Coach. You're the man, dude, honestly. You've done good. You done good, buddy.
A great man, a great coach, a great winner, high motivator. I saw him on several occasions throughout his 10 years at ESPN. He was a pleasure to talk to on a rare occasion that I was lucky and fortunate enough to allow you to have him espouse his words of wisdom upon me. And I remember what Greeny was talking about on Get Up. When he was giving Greeny some advice, and he did it to all of us. It was just a few seconds, really fast walker, always seemed in a rush to get someplace else, but even while he was doing it, would always drop a little pearl of wisdom here and there, and he was a lot of fun to be around on the rare occasion that I was around him, and he was a great man and required respect. He earned it, you knew he deserved it, and he got it. And so, you know, it's sad to know that he's gone, but it's a beautiful thing to hear that he was surrounded by his family and loved ones. He meant so much to the world of sports, meant a lot to ESPN, meant a lot to CBS, meant a lot to college football. I'm sure Reese Davis and others can speak, Mark May as well, and other folks. You know, you got a lot of people that can speak up for him a lot more intimately than me, but anybody that was around him, even if it was just for a few minutes, it was a treasure and a tribute for all of us because he was that wise, he was that smart, and he was that accomplished.
So that echoed my sentiment exactly, except when I talked to him, he did not appear to be in a hurry. But he was brilliant, he was principled, he was incredibly hardworking, and he was an American treasure who we will sorely miss. Well, that's today's monologue, and the show is brought to you by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy. They're a restaurant services company in Atlanta, Georgia, and they collect waste vegetable oil from restaurants, service grease traps, clean vent hoods, and also will sanitize the front of the house and back of the house. They also provide containment and collection products. So give PCR Energy a call today. You can find them on the World Wide Web at pcrenergy.com and give them a call. They've got a customer service line that is manned throughout the business day and into the night. If you're tired of spotty, dirty, unreliable service, think about pcrenergy.com. We're also happy to welcome to the show Bone Frog Coffee. They are a company that is manned and staffed by former Navy SEALs, and a large percentage of their coffee sales go to veterans. And they are our studio sponsor, and we're so proud to have them associated with and a sponsor of The Truth. Now today we're going to talk to Robert Ehringer. He's a former FBI counterintelligence agent and author. He and I got into it a little bit, just like we did with Fred Fleets. He is also a former CIA agent and whistleblower. So we're getting to know the deep state pretty darn good here on The Truth, and we look for people with insights into the intelligence community, because you know that I am a huge fan and a huge detractor. I love them for all the good things that they do. I don't appreciate them for the things that they do that are off the books, illegal, and unconstitutional in our country. You can start with killing the 35th President of the United States. You've heard me talk about that enough, but we can bring it all the way up through Epstein and possibly even the assassination or a role, maybe. This is not even allegedly, but just, there is innuendo, okay? That intelligence, maybe not the CIA, but intelligence may have played a role in Charlie Kirk's assassination. It's a theory. It is a working theory that many people are looking at, including Candace Owens, as well as Zach DiGregorio from Wolves in Finance. You can go check out their videos on YouTube. They get into the weeds pretty darn effectively on it. But we're talking to Fred Flitz about the Iran war that is being conducted right now. And Robert Ehringer actually was charged with infiltrating the KKK back in the 60s. We just had a fascinating interview. His book, Spymaster of Monte Carlo, sounds like a great read. So let's get right to our first interview and Robert Ehringer. This is The Truth. I'm John Gordon. Here we go. We talk a lot about the deep state on The Truth. And the fact of the matter is, I don't really know what to believe. So we just keep searching for truth. Here's someone that can help us. Robert Ehringer. He is a former undercover agent for the FBI. He has written like 16 books, including Zubrit's Rock, The Last Flight Out, the Ruse Book Drive, Emotional Blur. My gosh, Robert, what an intellect. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, John.
So do you think the deep state and the shadow government, is it real?
Definitely real. I lived in Washington, D.C. through the 1990s, working closely with Claire George. I had a real sense that there was what was not termed then as the deep state, but what I've come to call insider Washington. And truly, it is insider Washington that run things on the basis that presidents come and go, so do senators and representatives. But it is the permanent government of Washington that does its best to run circles around whoever new comes into Capitol Hill or into the Oval Office.
And I guess that's just a fact of life and just sort of something that we have to accept as a reality. because we hear it over and over again. It doesn't make it right, but it's a human condition to want to be able to be in charge, I guess. And so it feels like it's about power and who's going to drive the bus. But let's back up a bit. Tell us about your life as a spy, a spook, an undercover agent.
Sure. Well, it all began with investigative journalism back in the late 1970s into the 1980s when I was an investigative reporter for various newspapers on Fleet Street, national British newspapers. My specialty became infiltrating extremist groups, starting with the Ku Klux Klan. The KKK at that time, 1978, was trying to establish what they call a clavern, which is their word for branch, in Britain. I managed to get wind of it, and as a very young reporter back then, managed to infiltrate it to a point where I was put into contact with the Imperial Wizard of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan in Spartanburg, South Carolina, a man by the name of Robert E. Scoggin. And from that point on, Scoggin appointed me the guy who would help him organize the KKK in Britain, and consequently provided me with all the names and addresses of the various prospective members. I, working for the Sunday People newspaper, contacted everybody who wanted to be involved in the KKK, and we had a meeting. We arranged for them to come to London, where we wired a hotel room with microphones, and we had photographers down the road with telephoto lenses, and we got the goods on what they were trying to do in Britain. We had our story. It was in the bag. But then when I got on the phone to the Imperial Wizard, he said, he was surprised. He said, well, you know, you can't really be running the Klan for us over there until you're naturalized. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, well, you have to be initiated. I said, okay, what do I do about that? He said, well, you got to come to Spartanburg, South Carolina. So I and two reporters from the Sunday People traveled to Spartanburg, South Carolina, where during a 30-minute ceremony, we were all, the three of us were initiated into the KKK. After that, the lights were low. They actually had black lights on with black light KKK posters. The lights came on and out came a tape measure. Why a tape measure? Well, to size us up for bespoke robes, which they delivered to us a few days later, red robes, because they made us Kleagles, which were a Klan word for officer, presuming, of course, that we would return to Britain and run the KKK there. In fact, what actually happened was we got back to Britain, and it was a two-part story over two successive Sundays, front page, center spread. We blew the KKK in Britain out of the water to a point where they never, ever tried to reassemble there again. Anyway, sorry for that tangent.
No, listen, I grew up in the middle of the civil rights movement, and I lived in Macon, Georgia. Now, you can't get much more deep south than Macon. And racism was very much a reality. I remember vividly going to public places, and there was a water fountain with a sign saying whites over it, and a water fountain with a sign saying colored over it. Mm-hmm. And there were bathrooms similarly marked. And it always struck me as being very odd, just as a little boy. Mm-hmm. I've never, I think that you were the first person I've ever knowingly met who was a member of the KKK, even though your membership was for helping to tear it down, not build it up. Nevertheless, you had a peek behind the curtain, more than a peek. And I've just never known anybody that I knew was a member of the KKK. And so I've always been kind of curious about it. I've always had the perception, correct me if I'm wrong, that these were the members were of low IQ, low income, and lacked real a guiding light in terms of their personal ethics and values, because they killed people. I mean, we know that they killed people in Mississippi and in Georgia and in Alabama. So I never wanted to meet anybody from the KKK. I actually was fearful of the KKK as a young person because they would go to people that they deemed sympathetic to Black people, and they would burn crosses in their front yard. So to me, as someone who was old enough to remember, but too young to really fully appreciate what was going on, just something that I've kept over here. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to come into my life in any form, shape.
I understand. Growing up in London, mostly, I was detached from that kind of experience that you had. So to me, it was all new. What I found was that they were victims of their own environment. And by the time the late 1970s came around, they were rather benign. I mean, they brought guns out. And Robert E. Scoggin, the Imperial Wizard, showed me his illegal submachine gun that he had hidden away. But they didn't talk about doing violent things. I'm not saying I'm not in any way suggesting that the KKK was anything but a very nasty organization.
Yes.
But I found that, like I said,
everybody who was a member of the KKK committed murder, but the people that committed murder were members of the KKK, we think.
Yeah, it had its time, and it was a terrible, horrible atrocity that they even existed, and the things that they did, no question. And I'm hoping that what I did in my investigative journalism, it certainly in Britain, assisted with ensuring that they would never come there, and that appears to have been the result. But moving on, I'm using that as an example of how I got into the intelligence business. To my thinking, intelligence, journalism, book publishing are all part of, or all exist beneath the umbrella of the information business. I call it the info biz. So even though I've done all these things, intelligence, espionage, journalism, book publishing, to me, it's all the same. It's all about the acquisition of information, analysis, and dissemination. Of course, with journalism, it's a mass. You want the largest audience possible. With intelligence, it's exactly the opposite. What you're doing is secret, and it's meant for the eyes of only a select few. But it's all really the same. It's acquiring and processing information, and as the title of your show suggests, it's all about the truth, or it should be in journalism lately. I'm glad your show is called The Truth, because there isn't a lot of it around lately, especially in the media.
I mean, I thought it was just sort of a cliche to name the program The Truth initially. And I've been both surprised and gratified that so many people have commented, gosh, it's about time that someone has a brand called The Truth.
I like it. I've always, in anything I've done journalistically, and certainly what I did in the intelligence world, for me, it's always been about the truth. And I won't write anything or talk about anything unless it's absolutely true. I'm averse to exaggeration, self-promotion, or anything like that. Just the truth is fine with me.
Well, so tell us some more about your work. And you were affiliated with, or maybe a contractor, I'm not sure the right term, with the United States FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. In what context did you work for them, and what was your exact relationship?
Absolutely. I would be considered an independent contractor. At the time, we're talking about 1993, I was working closely with Claire George, former Deputy Director of Operations at the CIA. He'd retired, and in 1990, we decided to partner up and do private sector intelligence. That is, do intelligence for private clients, billionaires, other people who have a need to know certain things and need specialized people to find that information for them. What happened was I was also involved in some book publishing stuff, and it came to my attention that Edward Lee Howard, who was wanting to write a book. Edward Lee Howard was the only CIA officer to ever successfully defect to the Soviet Union. He did that in 1985. And he was a fugitive from justice. The FBI wanted to capture him so that he could face trial in the United States. And here Howard wanted to write a book. And I was serendipitously, I was in the position to become the editor of his book. The publisher involved wanted me to be his editor, but unbeknownst to the publisher, I was doing private sector intelligence with Claire George. And when I brought this to the attention of Claire George, he brought it to the attention of the FBI. It was an FBI issue, not a CIA issue, because Howard, it was a justice issue, not an intelligence issue. They wanted to arrest him.
So what year was that again? You said it. I didn't.
1993 is the year that I got involved in that.
And for how long did you have a contractor's relationship with the FBI?
The relationship with the FBI went on until about 2001, so 8-9 years. What happened was the Howard mission, which was a fascinating story unto itself, evolved into several other missions because I'd gotten to be very good at what I did as an investigative reporter and then later for the FBI, which is ruses, hence the title of my book, Ruse Undercover with FBI Counterintelligence. Whereas you're playing a role, you're acting, you are infiltrating, you are making somebody believe that you are their editor or their friend or both, and getting them to tell you things that your client needs to know. That's the concept right there. And so
what's the most damning information that you ever gleaned or learned from someone?
Howard himself, who revealed that he had done things that he was accused of doing by the FBI, intelligence that he had passed to the Soviets, later the Russians, something which he'd previously denied. And that would have been evidence against him in court had he ever actually been brought back to the United States. That was our original intention. We had a plan. We almost had him. We could have had him. He was going to show up in Warsaw, Poland for a newer project that I'd presented to him, backed, of course, by the FBI, but of course not to his knowledge. And everybody was in place. It was a part of the FBI CIA team. We're going to do an extraordinary rendition with the permission of the Polish government. It was aborted at the 11th hour by the Clinton White House. And so the FBI did not get its man, although it could have.
Wow, fascinating. So was he kind of the original Edward Snowden? No, not really, because he was really a traitor, it sounds like.
He was a true traitor in that he chose to spy. What had happened was he'd been hired by the CIA, and they were training him to go to Moscow to do certain very, very sensitive secret stuff. And then just before he was about to leave for Russia, they gave him, for what was then the Soviet Union, they gave him a new lie detector test and discovered drug use and theft, and thought, well, he's not the right guy for us. They abruptly fired him, probably not the best, in probably not the best kind of circumstances, called in, fired, not even driven home. And he was very bitter about that. And then he returned to his native New Mexico, where he began drinking heavily, seethed about what had happened to him, and finally decided, well, they trained me to be a spy, so a spy I'm going to be. And surreptitiously offered his services to the KGB, and then flew to Austria, to Vienna, and had an introductory meeting. And then from that time on, began providing them with secrets. He eventually was given up by Vitaly Yurchenko, who briefly defected from the KGB to the United States, was debriefed. It's now thought that Yurchenko did that specifically to take attention away from Aldrich Ames. They didn't care about Ed Howard so much, but they cared deeply about Aldrich Ames being discovered. So it's almost as if they compromised Howard. When Howard realized he was under surveillance, he devised a plan to flee, which he did. He liked to say on his TWA getaway card, and ended up going first to Finland, and then nobody knew where he was for about a year and a half until it was announced that he was in Moscow.
My gosh. So what is your opinion about Edward Snowden? Traitor or whistleblower patriot?
I don't have one on Edward Snowden. Clearly, if he exposed classified information like anybody else who does that, it doesn't matter if you're supplying it to the KGB, to China, or anywhere else. You are not allowed to expose classified information, to give it to anybody outside those whose eyes are supposed to be on it. You've broken the law. Do we hold him accountable for that? Well, governments choose to do that, because if they made an allowance where it's okay for him to do that, then what does that say to everyone else who works in highly sensitive positions and has access to classified information? It really comes down to, what has he done in Moscow since he was there? How cooperative has he been with Putin's regime? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe they just leave him alone. I can tell you from Edward Lee Howard's experience, he's homesick, I'm sure. It's not fun being in exile from your country. You begin to miss American sports, baseball, football. You begin to miss Skippy's peanut butter and hot dogs. And Edward Howard became even more of a drinker and a very unhappy person. A defector's life is not easy, and that goes equally for Russians who defect to the United States. They miss their own homeland, and often they're sorry they did and would like to reconcile if they could. Not a happy existence. I've met in passing in research I've done, investigations I've done, but they haven't featured in work I did for the FBI.
And anybody you can talk about or tell us about their defection and what they brought?
No, I mean, it's more interesting. It's my focus, my expertise is more dealing with Edward Lee Howard in Moscow and what that led to later on. His book was published, by the way, and I took it upon myself as his editor to excise from it some very sensitive things that the FBI did, classified information, essentially, that the FBI did not want known. If he'd gone to another publisher, that material probably would have been published. Maybe the publishers would have been talked out of doing it by the FBI if they caught it in time. But certainly Edward Howard could have gone to French publishers, German publishers. That material would be out there. It never was. That was the beauty of my own ruse for the Bureau, is we protected classified secrets while at the same time trying to capture him, which we could have done, but weren't able to do for, well, political reasons, which leads to a whole other subject, is that we think that organizations like the CIA, FBI this is a new thing, that they're politicized. Well, clearly, the FBI was politicized back in the mid 1990s. If they weren't allowed to do their jobs and catch their man. But back to the FBI work. Once it was determined that we had to put a rendition of Howard on hold, the assignment changed, and it became about collecting positive intelligence through Howard about all of the KGB people that he knew, and also the Cuban intelligence people that he knew. He met a bunch of them, had even considered moving to Havana at some point. And Howard even introduced me to the former KGB chairman, Vladimir Krichkov, which became my next assignment. He wanted to write a book, and working secretly for the FBI, I became Krichkov's editor, and I went to Moscow with a shopping list of questions to pepper him with all kinds of questions to answer espionage mysteries that FBI dearly wanted to know about. So it was very successful. I did go to Moscow. I met with Khrushchev a few times. He was fairly frank and did reveal things that were of great interest to the FBI as we collected positive intelligence. The mission then I met Howard in Havana in Cuba, and he introduced me to his Cuban intelligence contacts, some very senior people, which then led me to the Cuban interest section in Washington, D.C., and members of the Cuban intelligence who were operating there. And I would frequently meet with them, find out what they were up to. They tried to recruit me to spy on certain congressmen, which of course amused the FBI in fact, the FBI at any point could have used that as a reason to expel them. But
tell me, how does that happen? How does it work? How was the overture made to you?
I got to know them over a few lunches. They believed me to be a media person, a book editor who wanted to get information from them to write stuff and may possibly lead me to people in Cuba who might want to write a book. I was after Castro. How about if we do Castro's memoirs? Robert Vesco, who was the American businessman who had sought exile in Cuba to flee from justice in the United States. I was trying to open all these paths to get information about such people like Joanne Chesimard, the Black Panther who escaped from prison and murdered a New Jersey state trooper, and of course wound up in Havana, where she roamed freely, as so many criminals do, for years. Castro protected them all. So I was trying to open all these paths of how to reach these people. And in passing, they said, well, how would you like to, we'd really like information on this congressman and that congressman, almost as if there could be this exchange between us. If I got them information on U.S. congressmen, they would provide me with the kind of information I was looking for in Cuba.
What was their interest in the U.S. congressman? What did they want to do?
Particularly they were interested in Menendez, who has since gone to prison for corruption, and because he was a Cuban American, and being Cuban, he focused on Cuba a lot, and that upset them. So they wanted to dig as much dirt as they could on Menendez. Who knows? Maybe it was ultimately Cuban intelligence that managed to reveal the corruption that he got exposed for and prosecuted for. That I wouldn't know, because that would have been after my time.
So the people that wanted to know about Menendez were actually
Cuban intelligence.
Cuban intelligence.
Yes. And that was a real no-no, is like trying to ask an American citizen to investigate sitting U.S. congressman. It was pretty big stuff. But the FBI, of course,
did you report it to anyone?
For the FBI, of course. I was working for the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And later I wrote about it in my book, Ruse. I have a whole section about the work that I did infiltrating the Cuban intelligence.
So I have to ask you, Epstein, spy, intel?
Could be. I mean, it seems like there'd be a reason for him to have cameras and things wired up. So it seemed like his whole MO was building leverage on very powerful people, wealthy people. For what purpose? Blackmailing them, perhaps, or they'll maybe just leverage, the more polite term. But yes, he could have been. Some have suggested Mossad in Israel. That probably makes the most sense of all, given the Maxwell connection, because from my own experience, Robert Maxwell was most likely an operative for the Israeli Mossad. I speculate that it was probably the Israelis who took him out. At a time, remember what happened to Maxwell. He goes off on his yacht. Nobody knew why he was out there. I think he thought he was having a secret meeting with his benefactors, who I believe were probably Israeli Mossad. He thought they were going to give him the payoff he needed to get him out of all the trouble he'd gotten in from stealing the pension fund of the newspaper group he owned in London. Well, he got, I guess, pretty much what he deserved instead, which thrown overboard and drowned. He wanted too much, and sometimes, as far as intelligence services go, people need to be silenced, such as Epstein himself.
Who killed Kennedy?
Oh, I believe the CIA did.
Me too.
They were the organizers of it.
All right, you passed the litmus test. Did Building 7 fall because of a weakened foundation?
Of course not. Building 7 remains a huge mystery because there was no reason it should have collapsed other than a detonation.
Did Thomas Matthew Crooks fire the shot at President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania?
I don't have an opinion on that yet, but I remember seeing some news reports at the time on the internet that suggested it was somebody else entirely who was up there and murdered. And all I can tell you is that those posts were removed very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Check out Maxwell Urich. I think that's the person that you're alluding to. What about Charlie Kirk? What's your sense?
Oh, I don't think there was a concerted effort to assassinate him. But then again, I don't think all the evidence is in yet about that. You see,
it just looks sketchy to me that when the narrative about Tyler Robinson doesn't hold water to me. This guy climbed up. Well, he didn't climb up on the roof. He went up on a stairwell, but he put a rifle together, and then, which is plausible if he hadn't been detected yet. But then he fired the shot. Then he disassembled the rifle, and then he put it in a bag and he threw it off the roof, scaled down, ran into a wooded area, and reassembled it, and left it sitting on a blanket. That's craziness. That doesn't make any sense at all. And then he shows up at a Dairy Queen 6 hours later, getting a Mr. Misty and a hot dog. I mean, come on. I mean, he didn't look like a man that was the subject of a nationwide manhunt.
Yeah, no, it's true.
None of it makes sense. But
I agree. But I also tend to think that, like Oswald, if he had been put up to it by some conspiracy of others, he probably wouldn't have survived it himself.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. That is a very good question. It's the one thing that gives me hope that maybe we will get the truth eventually, but I suspect that he'll be Epsteined before it's all over and said and done, if he is innocent, and if he knows who did it or has insight that could lead to that person. So
getting back to you mentioned the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
If your viewers are interested, I write on Substack, and it's roberterringer.substack.com, and I have written about the Kennedy assassination. And if they were to go to my Substack page, all they'd have to do is search just put the words Kennedy assassination into the search mechanism, which I'm pretty sure exists, and they can read specifically who in the CIA I believe was responsible for JFK's murder.
Well, that would be Alan Dulles and James Angleton, would it not?
Yeah, it would be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's a fascinating conversation.
Among others.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they say, oh, you're a conspiratorialist, but the fact of the matter is, yeah, guilty as charged, because it was a huge conspiracy that involved not only the CIA, but the mob and the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover and probably Texas rich oil men as a beginning anyway of the people that were ensnared in this. So
mob was a decoy, but if I can interject there briefly about, you mentioned conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is a term that is so vastly overused these days. It was actually invented in 1967, that phrase, by the CIA to discredit anybody who wrote about the Kennedy assassination and saying that it was anyone other than Lee Harvey Oswald that killed him. Okay. Now, back in the reason I became a journalist was because I investigated the Bilderberg group when I was at college at American University in Washington, D.C. Back then, nobody had ever heard of Bilderberg, and I'd gotten wind of it and began to research it for a term paper. And I wrote to embassies all over Washington, questioned people everywhere. Nobody knew about it. Nobody said anything about it. Nobody heard about it. Eventually, I did, and anybody who talked about Bilderberg, who did know something, were considered conspiracy theorists. Okay. What it taught me, because it truly existed, I wrote about it. I revealed it. Then mainstream media, once they saw a magazine article I wrote in 1976 and were there for a Bilderberg conference in Torquay, England in 1977, everybody at that point knew it was real, and mainstream media did begin to report it. But what it taught me is that as soon as you hear the word conspiracy theorist, and somebody's calling you that and labeling you that, triple your efforts, because you're probably onto something.
Hmm. Exactly. I couldn't agree more. So last question, we know about Operation Mockingbird, the CIA putting its agents in virtually every mainstream media outlet in America and probably others. How pervasive do you think government intelligence is inside the United States? I mean, do we come in contact in our daily lives with people tied to intelligence that are spooks and they're watching us or watching someone or something?
Not really. It's not part of their charter to watch people. Or here's what they do. They have a division within the agency called domestic contacts, and they have branches in different cities around the United States, key cities like New York and San Francisco. Why San Francisco? Well, their purpose in life is access agents. They recruit people from universities and elsewhere, say Americans as well as foreigners, to people who have influence back home in their home countries, be it China or Russia, or American businessmen or academics or scientists who travel to China and Russia, possibly Iran. They recruit them to work with them. That's domestic contacts.
Well,
Even in Hollywood, you know how you notice that
sure.
You see Hollywood stars go hang out with Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez? I'd say about half of the Hollywood names that you see going over there are actually working as access agents for the CIA.
Interesting. Well, Robert Erringer, it's been a pleasure, an author, a former undercover agent for the FBI. Just a fascinating conversation. Tell us about your new book and where we can find it, and then how do people follow you as well?
Yeah, but I'm sorry there was so much before this, because the main point I wanted to talk to you about was my new book coming out next month on March 19th through Trine Day Publishing is called Spymaster of Monte Carlo. It is my nonfiction chronicle of events of what happened when I operated as first intelligence advisor and then director of an intelligence service for Prince Albert of Monaco. This is what I did after I wrapped up my undercover work for the FBI between 2002 and the end of 2007. I worked for Prince Albert doing intelligence work.
So what was Prince Albert looking for?
Well, he initially was looking for two things, which is why he retained me in the middle of June in 2002. He was concerned about the Russian surge into the French Riviera. Of course, Monaco is based on the French Riviera, wedged near the border with Italy. And he was concerned if there was much Russian money laundering, illegal activities going on inside his principality. Nobody was telling him anything. At that time, he was the hereditary prince. He was not the monarch as he is now. And for whatever reason, his own father, who was the ruling prince, and the government of Monaco kept him very much in the dark. And he felt very uninformed and was naturally curious about what was going on. And he knew of my intelligence background and wanted some help. The other issue was—
Did you work directly for him? I mean, did you contract with him?
Yes.
How did that come about?
I worked directly for Prince Albert. I was paid directly by Prince Albert, not by the government of Monaco, and reported directly to Prince Albert.
Wow. So for what period of time, how long did you have that?
5.5 years.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So what'd you find?
Oh,
Because I go to the Riviera, and you're not wrong. There is a strong, heavy influence of Russians that are there, and they got lots of money too.
Yeah, well, what we found was ultimately my downfall, was discovering a huge amount of corruption in Albert's own palace and among his own government ministers. And although he had pledged to his subjects and to me and others that he was going to introduce a new ethic to Monaco, these are the words he used when he was enthroned, the ceremony there in Monaco. Though he wanted to introduce a new ethic, he ultimately backed out of that promise and became complicit in corruption himself.
Oh my gosh.
Which is why I packed up and left at the end of 2007 and took all my files with me. But what was really sad about that is I created for him an intelligence service from scratch on a very minimal budget. And the reason I was able to do it so successfully is that early on, I created liaison relationships with the big intelligence services, starting with the CIA, Britain's MI6, the DST in France, SISMI in Italy, and a number of other European intelligence services. The beauty of that was they would provide us with whatever we wanted to know about anything. After all, remember, he's the Prince of Monaco, and as I pitched it to them, this man will be running Monaco one day. If you can help us, please, with intelligence, he's minded to clean up his principality. Well, he betrayed them, as he betrayed me, as he betrayed his subjects, because in the end of the day, he didn't have the backbone to actually clean up the corruption, and as I mentioned, eventually became complicit in it.
Are there any lessons to be learned from by Donald Trump about what you're saying? Because it just seems to me that he's probably dealing with a lot of the same sorts of things. Can he clean it up? We think he's got the backbone, but he's not stupid. He doesn't want to die either.
Well, he's not Prince Albert. He does have a backbone, and he's taken him on, and he's taken him on real well. Albert didn't have the intelligence that Trump has, didn't have the backbone that Trump has. Ultimately, he just threw his arms up in the air after, I'm sure, a bunch of the ministers and courtiers came to him and said, "Don't you get it? This is what we do in Monaco. This is our bread and butter. This is what we've always done." Trump doesn't go along with what we've always done. He doesn't agree with the status quo. He doesn't agree with insider Washington. Instead of engaging the process, which is what most presidents do when they enter the Oval Office, they're so happy to be there. They're just, okay, so what do I do now? Well, I've got all these guys from state and justice and everybody else telling me how I should do my job, and I do it that way. Trump is not a process president. He's an outcome president. He's actually trying to bring about outcomes that Washington always avoids. Washington just keeps going on with the status quo and processing stuff. As long as we can get more money for our institution, for our bureaucracy, and we can grow and hire more people, that's all we really care about.
Well, I totally agree with you. And I've said on this program a number of times that I think that President Trump is engaged in the process of dismantling the deep state one brick at a time. And I think it started with Russia. I think that, and I predicted that the 2020 election would be next, and the FBI is in Georgia. They've confiscated the absentee ballots and the ballot images. And I've worked on a case for 3 years. I've seen the evidence. I've talked to the witnesses, played devil's advocate with the forensic accountants. I'm pretty sure Georgia was stolen. I'm not pretty sure. I'm 99.9999% sure. I'd bet my last dollar on earth that it was stolen, and not by a few votes, but by tens, if not hundreds of thousands of votes. And then I think that we're going to get to the bottom of January 6th, and that he will expose the demonic behavior of Michael Burns, who shot and killed Ashley Babbitt in cold blood, and another lady lost her life in the Capitol tunnel. And I think we're going to find out eventually whose payroll Ray Epps was on January the 5th and 6th. And then I hope we'll find out who tried to kill President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania on January the 13th, 2024. And then maybe, who knows, maybe we'll find out information about Charlie Kirk and his tragic death. But those are answers that the American people demand. And personally, I think the federal government, if I didn't say it earlier, I'll say it again. If I did say it earlier, is rotten to its core. I think they're very bad actors inside our government that are operating outside the margins of the Constitution and the laws of this country for their own lust for power or greed or who knows what. But it needs to stop, because we have an opportunity to provide moral leadership for the world, and that requires us to be a moral country before we can do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember I'm not MAGA. I'm not even a Republican. I consider myself very independent, fiercely independent, as these days a journalist, and I try to be as objective as possible. But that was really strange at 3 o'clock in the morning, suddenly everything getting turned upside down during that election.
Yeah.
There is something seriously fishy about the whole thing. And I think you're right. I think they will get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And
Rob Pitt says, well, the election was 6 years ago. What possible good is going to come out of it? I'll tell you.
The truth.
Mr.
The
Pitt.
truth.
No, more important, as important as the truth. You're not going to be able to do it again. We're going to plug that hole, or the holes, because it was a full-fledged assault on our electoral system. Well, listen, thanks again, Robert Ehringer, for coming on. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you come back and chat with us again anytime.
Anytime, John, that you want me to. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, have a great rest of your weekend. And that is the truth. I'm John Gordon. A lot is happening around the world. Someone who has been on the front lines is Fred Fleitz. He worked for the CIA. This should be a good one. Mr. Fleitz, welcome to The Truth.
Good to be here.
So what do you make of what's going on in Iran right now? You know, I was on interviewed with John Fredericks earlier this week, and he asked me my opinion, and my opinion doesn't matter. I'm just saying this because it's a good conversation starter. My response was, if Jimmy Carter had done the job in the early 70s, we probably would not be where we are today, having been tortured by Iran for the last 50 years. Your thoughts?
I think that's right. Iran has literally been at war with us for almost 50 years, killed thousands of American soldiers. Quite a few were killed and maimed in Iraq, blown up our embassy and the Marine barracks in Beirut, another military facility in Saudi Arabia. It's a state sponsor of terror. It's tried to kill the president of the United States, other members of the president's cabinet. And there's a lot of reasons why President Trump decided to do this. And he first gave the Iranians a way out through diplomacy. They weren't interested in that. But I think clearly the president wanted to provide a pathway for the Iranian people to take their country back and to stop this evil regime. He's determined that Iran never get a nuclear weapon. But there's a big issue that's been coming up over the last 24 hours that's extremely important, and that's Iran's growing missile shield. The fact is that they're building 50 to 100 missiles a month. They have a huge drone arsenal. And another year, they'd have so many missiles and so many drones, it wouldn't be possible to attack them. And we know what Iran wants to do with them. Remember, during the Biden administration, there was an exchange of missiles between Iran and Israel. Iran started that and sort of showed the world why it had the largest missile arsenal in the Middle East, what the purpose of that arsenal is. Israel wanted to destroy this for a long time, and I think we just had to act.
So was it Iran that took a crack at President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania?
I haven't heard that. I don't think we really know.
That was the speculation. I mean, right after it, because we know that the Supreme Leader put out a hit and a hefty reward for anyone that would assassinate President Trump.
That's right. There were 2 assassination attempts. One that Trump barely escaped death. I don't think we frankly know the motivations of that shooter or the second shooter who tried to assassinate him at Mar-a-Lago.
You think Thomas Matthew Crooks was the would-be assassin in Butler?
Yes, but I can't comment. I don't know. I don't think we may never know.
Well, I hope we will, because I don't buy the narrative. I mean, but before we go there, let's talk about some more about Iran. Are these people crazy? I mean, we know their dogma sounds very detached from reality, and they want death to America. They want to obliterate Israel. I mean, it almost sounds like it's, they talk about suicide by cop. It almost sounds like suicide by attacking the most powerful countries on earth. I mean, what goal would they have? What expectation would they have? How would they think picking a fight with America was going to spell anything but doom for them?
I think they just assumed that they could provoke us and try to assassinate our leaders. Remember, they actually sent a hit squad in to capture an Iranian American journalist twice and speared her back to Iran because she was criticizing Iran. This woman lived in New York City, and the Iranians did that. They were going to assassinate the Saudi ambassador to the U.S. at a Washington, D.C. restaurant a number of years ago. I think they just assumed that American presidents would do nothing. And they were right until President Trump came along, that there was no president who wanted to do what was necessary to basically properly address the threat originating from Iran. We've had lots of adversaries over the years: North Korea, the Soviet Union, the current Chinese government, the past Chinese governments. But this is the only government that's put contracts out to assassinate our leaders and has been involved in active terrorist attacks to kill our troops. I'm not aware of any schemes right now by the Chinese to send terrorist groups out to attack American soldiers and American citizens, but we know Iran is doing that.
Okay, well, gosh, there's a lot to unpack there. I want to talk about China in a moment, but back to my basic question. Are they delusional? I mean, do they think that they can assassinate their adversaries, and in the case of Americans, that we're just going to turn a blind eye to it and allow them to get away with it? I could answer my own question. I think that we conditioned them to believe that way when they captured 53 of our embassy personnel in Tehran in the early 70s, and Jimmy Carter failed to extricate them from being captive for over a year and a half, or was it 2.5 years? A long time. And it ultimately cost Carter his reelection. But it seemed that we were particularly weak in that period of time. But then, I've trained as a lawyer, so I can argue either side. By going into Iran, we risked the lives of those 53 people. So clearly we were between a rock and a hard place. But has there been a consequence to them for that action and the other dastardly things that they've done over the last 50 years? It seems like we just keep spoiling the child.
Well, the best answer to your question is this is a country led by religious fanatics, Islamist religious extremists. They're at war with Israel. They're at war with the U.S. They're at war with the Sunni Islam world. They're at war with the Saudis. They want to kill people who did not share their fanatic religious view. And we know how they want to actually oppress their own people, which they've had to back away from over the last year. They've had to let up on their oppression of women somewhat because it was so unpopular and the regime was losing influence. But that's why this group doesn't want to it's so fanatic, they're simply impossible to negotiate with.
So what's next? Where does this go? I mean, I happen to know a fair number of, I think we call them Persians, people from Iran that live in the United States. They're some of the most generous, warm-hearted, hardworking, smart, entrepreneurial people that I know. They're nice people. I really like them. What the hell's going on inside the borders of Iran? They don't represent the people that are there, certainly in leadership, don't represent or even come close to mimicking the people that I know and genuinely like.
Well, the Persian diaspora around the world are rejoicing at what President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have done. And they're rejoicing at the death of Supreme Leader Khamenei, a terrible, bloodthirsty leader who was responsible for killing tens of thousands of Iranians in January who were protesting for freedom. And I say that because I've done other interviews with British TV, and they They claim that there's huge support for the regime in Iran. There is support for the regime. It's probably 80-20 against the regime. There are some supporters. But the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about the massive demonstrations in London, Berlin, Washington, Los Angeles, and other cities for what this administration has done for the killing of Khamenei. I hope this leads to a mass demonstration the regime cannot put down, and that they will be able to have a transition to a democratic government. I think there are plans that the Trump administration has to move that forward. They're not saying what they are. There's reports over the last 24 hours there may be an effort to arm ethnic Kurds along the Iranian border to help their Kurdish brethren in Iran to try to move on that effort. There are other ethnic groups that straddle the border who also may be able to start a movement to take back territory and to pressure the regime. The military campaign has just started. There are many, many targets that have not been hit yet. The early stages was to make sure we could proceed without unnecessary risk to our soldiers and airmen. That meant knocking out air defenses, air radars, the Iranian Navy, as many missiles as possible, the Iranian Air Force. There's going to be a very sustained series of attacks on the security infrastructure that's being used to oppress the Iranian people. But I will tell you that the transition to get this democratic movement going is going to be hard, and it's going to be a battle that the Iranian people have to take up.
So if before the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, was killed, and we were able to get him in a room and give him a shot of sodium pentothal and ask him, what do you hope to achieve? What do you want? What is your end game? What do you think he would likely have said?
I think he's a fanatic who would like to see people who don't share his religion die. I think he is.
So that would be billions of people. I mean, literally, do you think he really wanted to annihilate billions of Christians and Jews from around the world and anybody that I guess didn't pledge allegiance to Allah?
Let's think about Iran's fanatic hatred of Israel. Whenever they test their missiles, they would write death to Israel on the side of their missiles, sort of saying what the purpose of these missiles are. Why is Iran doing that? Israel's far away from Iran. It wasn't threatening Iran. It's this religious fanaticism that, you know, as rational people, you and I have trouble understanding. Why would a state be doing this? Why did they probably waste $1 trillion trying to pursue nuclear weapons and a missile program? And the economy is in tatters because of not just mismanagement and corruption, because they've wasted so much time and energy and scientific talent on weapons they just don't need.
You think the CIA has been pretty active inside of Iran for the last several years, working towards destabilizing the government? I don't know, but I would just be amazed if they haven't been.
There were reports in the media that the CIA was the agency that came up with the information that Khamenei was having a meeting during daylight hours at his palace with all these military and political leaders. I think that was an extraordinary development. But look, as a former CIA officer, I don't want to comment further on this.
Well, that takes all the fun out of the interview. I want to talk to you about the CIA because, you know, I'm so conflicted. Truthfully, I don't know how many people work for the CIA. I've read 100,000. That probably means it's 200,000 if that's the case. I don't know. But I have to believe that there are a lot of real patriots, dedicated men and women throughout the world that put it on the line every day to help protect our foreign interest and ultimately the freedoms that we enjoy in this country and the great life that it affords us. But I have also been a harsh critic of the CIA because I've witnessed things that I believe that they have done over the years that shock the conscience, that are extra activities that are not legal, lawful, or constitutional. We can start with the assassination of President Kennedy. I mean, I think I'd like to know, do you think the CIA had a role in killing Kennedy?
I think there's some confusing information about what happened in that instance. You know, but it's something I don't really want to get into today. Let me talk about the
Well, I
CIA.
think it's foundational, though, because I think it reflects on your credibility. I mean, if you're going to be a part of a system that allowed or participated in the assassination of a duly elected president, and you don't want to call him out on it, then that, to me, I mean, I don't want to offend you, but that shocks my conscience. I mean, we live in a free society governed by laws. And I was home from the 4th grade when President Kennedy was assassinated. I saw the news flash that came out in real time with my mom sitting on the couch after I'd been home from school with the flu for 3 days. And I sat there for the next 4 days and watched the events unfold. They are seared into my brain. I will never escape the sights that I witnessed, like John looking under the flag for his dad, saluting the unmanned horse carrying the coffin, and Jack Ruby stepping out in front of the cameras and assassinating the person that we were told assassinated the president, who had no paraffin on his body and no fingerprints in the sniper's nest. We could go on. And I'm not trying to be contentious with you. I'm really not. But these things bother me.
I'm just not here to
really
talk
bother
about
me.
this. I know you feel strongly about it. I'm not talking about this. I'm here to talk about Iran.
I'm curious why.
I'm here to talk about Iran.
Well, we've talked about Iran. I mean, we
do media interviews all day about Iran. You don't want to talk about Iran. I have other interviews to do. So, I mean, I can tell you a lot of stuff about Iran. And I know people in the MAGA movement who are very concerned about why we attacked Iran, that this may be violating promises President Trump made when he ran as a candidate. That's what I want to talk about today.
Well, you and I have no disagreement relative to Iran. I mean, I think that Iran has tortured, tormented, and abused us for 50 or 60 years. And as I started with the interview, I think if Jimmy Carter had done his job, we wouldn't be here where we are today. We had plenty of provocation to go into Iran after we got the hostages out. Why did we give them a free pass? All right. So I think we're in good agreement. But if you don't want to talk about anything else, I don't think there's a whole lot more to talk about, because I really want to look behind the curtain, and I want to know about your former employer and whether they are operating outside the confines of our laws and Constitution. But you don't want to talk about it. I don't understand.
I will talk about it. Here's what I say.
All right. Thank you.
I don't know what was going on with Lee Harvey Oswald, but he apparently was a CIA source. I don't understand what was going on with that. And I'm glad that we had the documents coming out on what happened, that President Trump released them. But I frankly don't know enough about it to tell you more about that. I'm very concerned that these documents, so many years after the assassination happened, were still classified, because, we classify things because something's sensitive or it involves an individual, and we don't want to release something that might reflect on them unfairly. But there's nobody in these documents named who was alive. So what was being hidden? I don't know. I agree with you. It looks suspicious. I just don't know more than that to tell you. And I know that that the agency has done things over time that it shouldn't have done. And we learned about that in the Church and Pike Commission reports of the 1970s. I will tell you this, as a CIA officer, I was an analyst and I fought politicization. I was retaliated against and barely survived at the agency. I had to get attorneys. I went to the Inspector General. I actually got through a terrible effort of retaliation because I wouldn't write the intelligence that the Biden administration wanted. They were politicizing intelligence to basically favor things that the Biden White House wanted to hear. They didn't want to hear what I had to say. I've worked with people in the operations world, and I think they're real heroes.
As do I.
They've done incredible things, collecting information, covert options.
And I think you're a hero. And I don't want to say anything that makes people think that I don't appreciate your service to our country. But you look at Building 7 collapsing, and we're told that it was because of a weakened foundation from the Twin Towers. I don't buy it. Most architects and engineers that have looked at it have said it is a controlled demolition. I don't even have a working theory about what happened, but there's just so many questions, and nobody is coming forward to genuinely respond to them. And then we've heard Epstein is intelligence, and that's why he was able to get away with the things that he did. And that falls directly within my paradigm that many leaders of our country are blackmailed or coerced into going along, and that Epstein was part of that coercion because he caught them in compromising positions. We know that he had cameras in his houses. And you know, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm just genuinely intellectually curious. I mean, one side of me says, well, you know, if the Israelis and MI6 and the Russians and the Chinese are going to do it and we don't do it, then we lose. But damned if I can get past the moral dilemma of engaging in these kinds of activities when it involves exploiting young people, children, and evidence of cannibalism. I mean, this is really serious stuff to me. And it's not the country that I want to live in or be a part of and enable. But I love all the good things about our country. But these things that we are hearing about are shocking to my conscience, and I think to many Americans.
A former CIA director wrote a book one day called Secrecy and Democracy and tried to explain why secret government agencies operate with great difficulty within our democratic republic. And I think that's exactly right. It's a very difficult fit. And in a perfect world, we wouldn't have these secret agencies. We wouldn't have all the secrecy. But we live in a world of enemies, and it's necessary to have secret intelligence organizations that will not tell the American people what they're doing. They're supposed to tell Congress. They need incredible oversight, and we haven't been seeing that oversight. These agencies have been doing things that they haven't told Congress about, or Congress goes along with operations and efforts that these agencies are doing that they shouldn't be doing. I mean, there's a lot here that I agree with you on. I've seen a lot of good in the agency. I've seen a lot of politics at CIA, and those who say, well, our intelligence agencies, they're above politics. I mean, I know that's not true. I was persecuted for political reasons by the Clinton administration. And there's a New York Post op-ed I'll send you where I write about that. I revealed, and actually I ran this op-ed by the CIA to get it cleared. And I revealed what they did to me because I wanted to expose the fraudulent whistleblower who started Trump's first impeachment. I know what whistleblowing is, and I know what a fake whistleblower is. And there was all kinds of politics in that. You probably agree with me on that. I think good people can survive this. And I brief young people about government. They often say, it's the deep state, the CIA is so politicized. I said, look, if good people like you don't go into government, we are conceding the government to the deep state and to the Democrats. We need good conservatives, men and women of goodwill, good Christians and Jews who believe in our system to help take it back. And I've convinced some people to go into government.
Well, you know what, Fred, can I call you Fred?
Please.
I tell my employees, I can handle good news, I can handle bad news. Just don't bring me BS. And I really appreciate your engaging with me on this today, because there was a point in the interview I didn't think you were going to, but I think we've really started to make progress. And I think that you and I are very closely aligned. It's not, I don't want to burn it down. Far from it. I just want to surgically remove the evil that I see within and reform the intelligence agencies of our country. And, you know, maybe we do have to do things that none of us are proud of, or that we will be proud of, but that are necessary to protect this and future generations of our country. But there should be an approval process. There's got to be bounds. There've got to be guardrails put on where we don't cross a line that we shouldn't. So I think you and I are really starting to make some progress here, and I appreciate your engaging with me on it. Let's talk about China. You mentioned it a moment ago. You said that they're not, I think, I don't remember exactly what you said, but they're not sending terrorists into our country. I kind of wonder about that, frankly. I mean, we had that open border for 4 years, and we know, I thought there were 10,000. I now read that there are 150,000 military age fit men in this country that walked across the southern border. Do you think that's a factual statement? And are you concerned about it?
11 million illegal migrants crossed into our country under Biden. Hundreds of thousands of them were gotaways. We don't know who they were. I didn't say China wasn't sending in operatives or terrorists. I said they weren't sending assassins to kill President Trump. I hope I'm right about that.
Fair enough.
But I think there are large numbers of Chinese operatives and intelligence officers, Iranian operatives, terrorists, Russians. I think every adversary on earth took advantage of this open border under Biden. And I understand there was testimony that the Attorney General gave to Congress last year where they had apprehended at least 1,000 Iranians who appeared to be some kind of operatives with the Iranian government. And she wanted to brief the committee in closed session to tell them more. So look, bad stuff happened under Biden that really undermined our national security. That's why there's such a high state of alert right now at the Department of Homeland Security, because there's real concern that there are Iranian sleeper agents in our country who are going to retaliate for Operation Epic Fury.
How do we rat them out? I mean, we had this guy that just last weekend went into a bar in Austin, Texas, and killed 4 people. The bizarre, I don't even know how to classify it or characterize it. I mean, the thing that was shocking to me is that he had been here for 26 years, had no criminal record, had no reason to be suspected of anything. We don't really know whether he was a plant or whether he just went off the deep end on his own. But if it was a plant, then I'm genuinely concerned.
We know that radical Islamists, we know at least ISIS, have been able to radicalize people like that in this country by putting extremist sermons on the internet and through websites where they recruit people. So it's not that they planted them, but they found vulnerable individuals who would believe their radical BS and basically get and convince them to commit acts of terror. That may be what happened here. There are other examples of that. And I think there are other, I don't think he was sent here by Iran or another state, but I think he may have been recruited over the internet. I think that's possible.
Well, your explanation certainly has a ring of truth to it. I was deathly afraid of China a year and a half ago. Spy balloons hovering over our military installations, farmland being bought up around our sensitive military sites, people flooding over the southern border, fentanyl coming in, enough fentanyl to kill every living American. And then we also know that Biden collected $3 million from at least one Chinese company with ties to the CCP. We've had on Peter Schweitzer on our program twice before. We had General Robert Spalding on, who's written a book called Stealth Warfare. And I was genuinely hyper-focused on China. What a difference a year makes. I mean, I don't sense the level of threat that I did a year and a half ago today. And Biden said they were just competitors. I had a really strong negative reaction to that. But damned if I'm not starting to think that maybe we're more competitors than adversaries right now. Have I been brainwashed? Or one other thing I want to throw in there, President Trump, to my amazement, allowed 600,000 Chinese students to come to the United States. I couldn't put that together either. So your thoughts?
I think China is an adversary, and it is a long-term adversary that is working in just about every realm to best the United States as the world's leading power, steal intellectual property, build its military, its nuclear forces, its intelligence services. I think it's a serious long-term threat. I believe that Trump understands that. There's concerns with the economy. There's concerns with Taiwan, but he's also trying to lower tensions with Taiwan by improving diplomatic relations with China. Trump is trying to confront our adversaries, but try to find a way to live with them peacefully. He said in his speech in Saudi Arabia last May, he wanted to promote peace through strength and commerce. And that was a message to Russia, to Iran, to North Korea, and to China that we would respect a different system if you would live with us peacefully and we'd all get rich. It was a major move away from the neocon approach of nation building and forcing our way of government on other countries. And obviously the New York Times, the Washington Post threw a fit. And I don't know whether China's going to listen to that, but Trump is still going to Beijing in April. I think he's going to keep pursuing this strategy.
Smart. very smart. I think your analysis is spot on. So I mean, it was so easy to take over Venezuela. I mean, it just seemed to be a piece of cake the way we extricated the leader, and the Venezuela people cheered in the streets. And if you had told me that would happen 6 months ago, I would have said you're crazy, that was going to be provocational because China and Russia were there, and it was going to be a real uphill battle to try and do something like that, and that we would be misguided. And boy, would I have been wrong. Can you believe how apparently easy it was to topple that regime and go in and protect our southern flanks?
It was really an incredible operation that involved some very brave U.S. servicemen and servicewomen. It showed that the U.S. military has capabilities that no one knows about, which were used. I mean, knocking out the power system. They had special devices that apparently incapacitated some of the Cuban guards after our special forces landed. But there's a lot of factors that contributed to this. That is that the Cuban forces guarding Maduro and his own forces were frankly incompetent. Maduro shouldn't have put himself in a position for this to happen. But we had good intelligence of where he was and what his habits were, which I might add, that's the kind of thing that the CIA would be collecting. I did not think that would be possible in Iran. I couldn't have dreamed that the supreme leader would be so stupid and so arrogant that he would make himself vulnerable for an attack, thinking we would never attack during the day, which is why he's dead. He figured he could have this meeting, these officials, during the day. So there was incredible bravery, incredible expertise, and frankly, a bit of stupidity, both in Venezuela and in Iran.
These are things that have haunted our country for, as I said, 50 or 60 years. And now we have some optimism that maybe Cuba could be next. And when you zoom out to outer space and look down on Earth, it seems to me that President Trump very intentionally is building a wall around the United States and solidifying our defense. And maybe even Greenland. Those hopes seem to have dimmed in recent weeks, but it's pretty smart, really, if he's able to pull it off. Would you agree?
I would agree, but I would point out that the whole purpose of reestablishing the Monroe Doctrine and American dominance of the Western Hemisphere is because Trump never wants to see video again of hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants lining up at the Mexican border to come into our country. He sealed the border, and he's trying to deal with the source of this instability that led to all these criminals and drug dealers and possible terrorist agents and Chinese intelligence officers coming into our country. So there's a bigger plan here. Venezuela is just part of it. Concerning Cuba, Cuba's never been weaker, and it's now losing its subsidized oil supply. The economy is run very badly, so it has never been weaker. And obviously, our Secretary of State, a Cuban American, has a vested interest in trying to find a way to win freedom for the Cuban people. I think it will be hard, but it is on Trump's agenda.
Well, it just seems to me that President Trump is systematically going about correcting all the sins of the past from our previous leaders that didn't want to confront these very difficult issues. But one by one, he is confronting them. And on Cuba, I think you're spot on. I saw a video of this YouTuber who went to Cuba a couple of months ago and videoed it. And it was a really compelling video. But the takeaway was that these people are mired in the 1950s and they are living in poverty. Now, the United States could change that pretty darn quick if we were able to have them as an ally and reestablish trade and good relationships with the Cuban people.
I mean, it's a rare opportunity, and I think that there's a chance we're going to have some aggressive policies and offer the Cuban regime an opportunity to relent and maybe push for a democratic transition. I don't know what Rubio's plan is for Cuba. I know that he's determined to pull something off there. I want to hear more.
Well, Fred Fleitz, thank you so much for coming on The Truth today. It's been a very stimulating conversation for me, and I appreciate your indulgence. What do you do now that you're no longer working for the government?
Well, I'm a vice chair with the America First Policy Institute, a conservative think tank in Washington, D.C. I work on national security with General Keith Kellogg, who had been the president's special envoy for Ukraine. And you can learn about our work at americafirstpolicy.com. And you can follow me on @FredFlights on Twitter.
Well, I attended an America First Policy symposium in Washington 2 or 3 years ago, and you're certainly aligned with a wonderful organization, and I commend you and the work that you all do. So have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you for coming on The Truth, and I hope we're able to have extended conversations in the not distant future.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Joining us now is John Gordon, and John Gordon, as you know, is the host of the one of our top weekend shows, The Truth with John Gordon, every Saturday across our network and all of our media apps and all of our streaming at 12 noon, high noon, The Truth with John Gordon. John, thanks for being with us again. You got a great show. You got a great following. It's very difficult to do on a weekend, but you've been able to build quite the show and quite the following, and we thank you for that, John.
Well, it's a privilege to be on your network, and I just appreciate the confidence that you've shown me over the last 3.5 years, and it has been a labor of love. So I really appreciate it, Johnny.
Well, thank you, John. It's always fun, and my team loves you. I got to tell you that. Al does your show. He always sends me stuff that you say. Michael Coleman, who's basically monitoring things, he tunes you in. So, like, they don't necessarily listen to my show, but they listen to your show. So, like, they always tell me, hey, you got to, Gordon said that. I'll be getting text at like 1:30. Gordon said this. I'm like watching the hockey game, dude. So it's all good.
Well,
John, I want to get your take, unadulterated, unfettered, unvarnished, your take on Trump's invasion of Iran.
My take is that it should have been unnecessary. Had the 39th president of the United States, that would be Jimmy Carter, have done his job in the 1970s, we would not be where we are today. If Carter had done what he had every reason to do in the early 70s, Iran would have been tamed. And I'm really sorry that we've had to endure 50 years of terrorism, torment, loss of life, and all the indignities that go along with it by putting up with this terrorist nation. Thank you, Donald John Trump, for doing your job.
Do you think he did the right thing?
Absolutely. He did the right thing, and he gave them plenty of warning. He tried to negotiate, and he tried to get them to behave, and they utterly refused. He said they negotiated, but not in good faith, and they were just jerking us around, as you would have expected them to do. And finally, President Trump said enough is enough, and now they're seeing the other side of the United States guns and military. And my only regret is that it didn't happen sooner. But kudos to President Trump for having the courage. It's a generational event that will change the trajectory of the world and allow us to live in peace and without threats of terrorism. That is my hope, and I think that President Trump is well on his way to doing just that.
John, what about those that are saying, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Steve Bannon? What about those that are saying that this is not MAGA, this is not what Trump said he was going to do, he wouldn't get us into any more wars? How do you respond to that?
Well, that notion occurred to me too. I mean, I was surprised, mildly surprised, that President Trump did it, because he's been so adamant that he does not want war, that he is not going to. But, you know, there comes a point in time where you've got to do the job that you were elected to perform and protect the free world. And so I don't really think that he had any choice unless he wanted to allow this nation state of terrorism to continue into the future and well beyond his presidency. So I get the sentiment that they're expressing, but I don't agree with it. And I just think that it's high time that Iran joined the rest of the peaceful nations of the world.
John, you know, last week we had a spirited discussion about Department of Homeland Security as it relates to ICE and illegals and things of that nature. At the hearing this week, and I know you were tuned into it, Kristi, I'm not even going to bother to play the clips here, but Kristi Noem got skewered by a lot of Republicans over a lot of different things. The jets, the luxury jet, the $250 million in advertising, whatever, the bed in the jet. One of the Democratic senators were showing pictures of the bed. Not cool. But she got skewered. I mean, she held up pretty well, right? But and then one of the questions she had was, are you going to have ICE agents around voting booths? And she said, I don't know. Are you going to let illegals vote in your election? I mean, it's sparring back and forth. But I think it was a tough day for her. What was your take on that, John?
Well, not to poke the beehive again, but I tried to tell you so. You wouldn't really let me express my full thoughts on this.
Well, go ahead now.
I was very mischaracterized and misunderstood. I am for deporting all illegals, period. Okay? I am also committed to protecting Republicans in the midterms. And just look at the poll numbers. I mean, the poll numbers show that President Trump was elected because of his stance on closing the border. Kudos. He promised to deport illegals. He's doing what he promised. But here's the problem. It's messy and it's turned violent. And, we always blame the victims, it seems like, in everything. And so we're blaming the poor police officers who that woman turned her car on and used as a lethal weapon, and he shot and killed her. And then people want to become outraged, the people on the left. And so all I'm saying is this. We've got to deport illegals, but we've got to do it in a smart fashion. And maybe I'm just an idealistic, old man. I mean, I have a better excuse if I was a young man. But there is a way to go about this and flip the narrative on the Democrats and set President Trump up to be the hero. And so my only point is, I think one size fits all is not an appropriate strategy to get rid of the aliens. What I would like to do is turn all the COVID vaccination centers into guest registration centers. You have to go there and register in 6 months, and then we're going to categorize people on felons, rapists, robbers, murderers, out. People have 6 months to register, and if you get caught picked up on the street at 6 months and 1 day and you haven't registered, out. No questions asked. But then a sensible, more kinder, gentler approach to deporting people. I don't think alligator Alcatraz, it doesn't work for me. It may be necessary. But for hardened criminals and people that have gamed the system, yeah, fine, no problem. And if you are on that 6 month and 1 day list, straight to alligator Alcatraz, no exceptions. But if you have been here and you have worked and you have paid your taxes and you have not committed crimes, we're not going to give you a pathway to citizenship, but we will give a pause and let you remain here and work for some indefinite period of time or time as prescribed by the policymakers. And so I think we just all join hands. We acknowledge the fact that it is a mess, but it's not a mess that we should risk the control of the Congress over right now. That's all I'm saying. So I've authored the Gordon plan, and I'm going to send it to you when I get done with it.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me express myself. And people are free to disagree. I understand that the emotions. Oh my God, I thought your listeners loved me. Not after that episode.
Well, they love you on Saturday at noon because you got a tremendous audience. So,
yeah.
But look, we are everything is. You got to be able to have a discussion. Things get things get a little heated because both of us are passionate guys. So, no problem there.
Well, I fuss sometimes with my wife, but we've been married for 49 years.
Well,
so we're not going to let a little dust up interfere with our friendship, not for a second.
49. Well, you got me by 17. So you've married a long time, John.
Just say yes, ma'am. That's all it takes.
That's dude. I mean, come on. That's what I tell. That's what I tell I tell my kids forever.
Yeah.
Just do what she says. Life will be so much easier. And at the end of the day, most of what she says makes sense. So one thing or two, you don't like it, just go with it. Like, who cares?
That's what I tell my kids.
You know what I do.
Listen
I
to
just
your
go with
mother.
it.
Just listen to your mother.
It's like, happy wife, happy mom, happy life. Everything is fine.
Yeah.
Just do what she says. Oh, who cares?
She knows what's up.
Yeah, especially Ann, as my wife, she dies on every single hill. So there's no like, oh, I don't care, it's up to Dad. No, she has to weigh. She'll weigh in on anything. She'll weigh in on how many potatoes to put on your plate. Okay, she dies on every single hill. So I save my ammo. Actually, I don't even have any ammo. Even if I had it, it's no good anyway. It's blanks.
Well, that's not true, John, because you do great work. And as I sent to you yesterday, you can now say, I am somebody, because you have an FBI file. And the Biden administration was looking at you. And so I think that is a absolute
badge of honor, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Biden administration.
Ain't nobody looking at me.
They're investigating me.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
For what? Telling the truth.
They came up with nothing, but their plan was basically they went after every conservative media that they could find to try to find something and get them off the air during that. That was such a corrupt regime. It's like beyond the pale.
We were on the verge of losing this country.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what this world would be like if Kamala Harris had somehow been able to take the office of the presidency? I mean, she was Biden on steroids. I mean, it would have been the end of our nation as we know it.
Yeah, you would have had all of us would have gone shut down. I mean, they would have figured out. It would have been complete control. There would be no conservative media. All of it would be gone. That was their plan, and so they went after everybody. Me and everybody. I mean, I'm small potatoes compared to some of the bigger conservative outlets out there, but all of them would have gotten nailed because they wanted total control, total censorship, and because that's the only way they can win. Everybody knows that censor and cheat is the only way they can win, John. So.
Well, and the SAVE Act, the threat to democracy, can you imagine the hypocrisy? While they're threatening democracy, they're accusing everyone else of threatening democracy, and they want to block an ID to vote. It's just code word for cheat. They can't win in the competition for ideas. The only way they can win an election is to cheat. And that's what they're telling you in real time, right in front of you.
Unbelievable. John Gordon, I want to thank you for being with us. And people want to follow you. Where do they go?
Well, you can listen to us every Saturday and Sunday from noon to 2 on the John Fredericks Media Network. We're also on cdm.press. We're all over social media at John Gordon Truth. And I'd love to hear from folks. Just write to me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. Thanks for having me.
John, thanks for being with us. Thanks for your insight. We'll see you at high noon on Saturday, The Truth with John Gordon across the John Fredericks Media Network. My best to your wife, John. Talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you, John. My pleasure.